Gentlemen, the time is 5:31 and we have the presence of a quorum, and this meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting has been given for the time and manner required by law. Our first item tonight is an information item. Dr. Dupree.
Yes, ma'am. The last few weeks in our district, we've had quite a number of concerns expressed in the media, lots of reporting. The community has also expressed concern about some issues around our police department and how they've handled forgery and counterfeit monies in our schools. Unfortunately, the story has not been told completely, and because we believe in full transparency in Fort Bend ISD and authentic dialogue, we want to take an opportunity to have a discussion with the board and to present publicly to the board and engage in this discussion to allow us to kind of address our side of this story, if you will. So we've asked our police chief, David Ryder, to spend a few minutes presenting some information to the board about our police department, their goals, objectives, specifically the counterfeit money issue and some of the other things we're dealing with in our district right now. And we look forward to the discussion with the board this evening. So I'll turn it over to Chief Ryder.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Madam President and Board, Dr. Dupree. Having served as a police officer for more than 25 years and having the privilege to serve here for over 6 years with Fort Bend ISD and our fine officers, I feel it's important to provide you with a law enforcement update to share some of the facts and the key insights with you that are important to us as we serve more than 74,000 students in our district. We're here tonight to be transparent and proactive. This is a law enforcement presentation meant to educate about the police department. This is not a presentation about administrative discipline. My goal is to bring awareness to how your police department operates. It is important to recognize that just as officers do not get involved in matters of school discipline, educators do not get involved in police matters. In fact, educators are legally prohibited from interfering with police investigations. As a law enforcement entity, part of our job is to investigate allegations that may have legal consequences. However, I have said consistently to the officers that arrest is a last resort. In fact, in most cases, no charges are ever filed against our students. Fort Bend ISD is one of the most diverse districts in the nation, and we are blessed that our student population is one of the most diverse in the country and globally. Our strength is our diversity, and we are the snapshot of the future for our region, state, nation, and globally. I think we all remember growing up and going to school. I would bet that most of us did not have officers assigned to our campus, but today is a different time for many reasons. The laws today are more stringent and the risks are greater for all students, no matter their ethnicity. Even still, we embrace the diversity of our students and our staff, and we know we're a stronger district because of the different viewpoints and cultures that make us who we are. Your Fort Bend ISD Police Department is also a diverse department, much like our community. I'm proud of the 54 officers that we entrust to protect our students. Our officers are called school resource officers. The most important word there is resource. We also understand that we must be consistent in our procedures and practices. One way we are demonstrating that is we're in the process of becoming an accredited police department through the Texas Police Chiefs Association. This is a self-assessment where we demonstrate that we follow 166 best practices in law enforcement. So let's take a look at what your police department looks like. We have 54 officers. 24, or roughly 45%, are African American officers. We have 14 Hispanic officers, which make up 26%, and 15 Caucasian officers that make up 28%. We also have 1 Asian officer. Let's talk about the command staff. The command staff includes 2 lieutenants and 5 sergeants. These are the supervisors for all the officers. Our 2 lieutenants, 1 is African American and 1 is Caucasian. Of our 5 sergeants, 4 are African American and 1 is Caucasian. To be clear, all reports are reviewed for accuracy and thoroughness by one of these supervisors. And for every report that is referred to the district attorney's office, that report is reviewed by at least 1 sergeant and at least 1 lieutenant. We do not enjoy having to refer students to the district attorney when they break the law. But the district attorney allows for another set of eyes, another investigative entity, to review those reports prior to charges being filed. This is a checks and balance system. Please remember that laws apply to everyone, whether on campus or off campus, which includes all of us in here. Police, schools, parents, and our community have an obligation to teach students how the law applies to them. Because of the untruths and misinformation shared and discussed, I'm here to provide information, awareness, and education about forgery or counterfeit reports. The goal of our Fort Bend ISD police officers is to protect and help students and staff. Part of that protection involves following the law and the duty to gather all available facts when allegations of criminal offenses are reported to us. When our officers are trying to determine the facts of any case, no amount of time spent following up is wasted time. Every student matters, and we explore all available resources to determine the facts of each report. Before we talk about the forgery or counterfeit cases, we need to understand what the forgery law is. When we hear forgery, most of us think about somebody signing our name when we didn't authorize it, and that is part of it. However, the forgery statute covers other areas, including U.S. currency that's altered, copied, or fake. Forgery is found in the Texas Penal Code in Section 32.21. Part of the definitions there include writing, which are defined as money or coins. So a person commits an offense if they forge a writing with the intent to defraud or harm another. The element of intent has to be there. And when that happens, that is a third-degree felony. Due to the recent news story headline, the perception is that these forgery cases all revolve around money being passed in the cafeteria at lunch. Well, the truth is, these cases also involve forged checks and students and adults who are victims of forgery. In several cases, students sold items to other students and adults who are and receive forged money, and adults are also the victim of forgery. In several cases, due to the relationship with their campus officer, these students and these adults reported those offenses to the officer on the campus. And it is our officer's obligation to then look into that for them. From a historical perspective, here are the total number of forgery cases as reported to our officers for the respective years. And as a reference point, the total number of police reports written for each year. For 2013, we wrote 2,440 case reports. Of those, 7 were forgery cases. Only 2 were referred to the district attorney. In 2014, we wrote 2,287 case reports. Only 16 were reported as forgery, and only 2 were referred to the district attorney. And in 2015, we wrote 2,266 case reports. Only 5 were reported as forgery, and 3 were referred to the district attorney's office. And so far in 2016, we've had 2 reported cases of forgery and no referrals to the district attorney's office. I tell you that to illustrate we've written over 7,000 reports in the last 3 years, and 7 have been referred to the district attorney's office for forgery. Only the 2013 and 2014 cases have been disposed of in the justice system. 3 out of those 4 cases that you see on the slide had nothing to do with paying for lunch at all. An open record request was given to us on March 15, 2016 by a local news reporter. That open record request was filled. On April 28th, the initial story reported that a middle school student was arrested in this forgery case, even though the reporter had the police report that clearly stated the bill was quickly determined to be authentic and no charges were filed. Community Relations called the station, who pulled the report early that morning. However, it had already been picked up nationally. I called the reporter at 2 o'clock that afternoon, and I spoke to him for over 30 minutes, outlining the details of the case. I told him that no arrest had been made in that case. Then the reporter questioned whether the use of an officer was a good use of resources. What he questioned was the officer calling the guardian, asking where the bill came from, going to the convenience store to determine whether or not they in fact actually gave the bill as change, and then driving to the bank to make sure and determine from the experts if that bill was authentic. I think that's a pretty good use of resources, considering we cleared that up in one afternoon and we exonerated that student and we drove the bill back to the guardian and handed it off to him. Well, when that wasn't good enough, then he claimed racial motivations. The officer that handled that case was an African-American officer with a prosthetic leg. There were no racial intentions or motivations at all. I told him our police department has worked hard to build positive relationships with our students, our parents, and our community. His angle was purely divisive, and I didn't approve of it, and I told him that. Despite having the facts, an inflammatory, exaggerated story was run anyway. The afternoon story claimed what you see on the slide, that a 13-year-old was our public enemy #1, that the student was stopped by the long arm of the law, and that the officer didn't apologize. Well, here's the truth. What most people don't know is that that case is 18 months old. That case happened in December of 2014. The cafeteria workers receive bills from the students when a bill looks unusual. They use a starch pen as a preliminary tool to quickly give an authenticity indication. This is a common practice in places where money is received. The bill was aged, and the pen indicated the bill might not be authentic. This was reported to the officer, who noticed the bill had red serial numbers. He called the guardian and asked her to come to the campus. The guardian told the officer the bill was received as change a few days earlier from a local store. The officer drove to the store, and the clerk remembered the unusual bill, verifying the story and removing any doubt of intent. And if you remember, intent is an element of the offense. The officer then drove to the bank to allow the experts to determine if the bill was authentic, so the guardian would know for sure. It was determined to be authentic, and the officer left the bank, called the guardian, and drove it back to her house. The officer told her the bill was old and she might want to hang on to it. She thanked him, and he left. The end result? In one day, unlike most other police departments, we used all available resources to quickly exonerate the student. I think that's a good use of resources. No charges were filed, and the case was closed. The officer quickly and efficiently did his job and exonerated the student. There's nothing to apologize for. We strongly believe in building relationships with our students to earn the right to serve them. Most of the forgery cases reported to us by students trust and respect their campus officer. They know they have direct access to the officer, and that officer will help them. Part of the protection involves following the law and the duty to gather facts when allegations of criminal offenses are reported to us. So what's ahead? I want to assure you that we've been working diligently to provide accurate and timely information to the media. As you may know, the media is one of the least preferred ways our parents prefer to receive information about the district. Close to 95% of our parents prefer to receive information sent straight to them via email, voice messages, and through our district and campus websites. We have a message board in our hallway at the police department, and the message on there reads, "Better is possible." We are always looking for ways to improve. We always use the best information and facts as the basis to help us improve and to better serve our students and our community. Thank you for your time and the ability to share the truth with you this evening.
Thank you, Chief Ryder. Thank you for being here tonight and sharing that information with us. I'm sure the board has some comments and discussion. Ms. Hellinger?
Sure. Thank you, Chief Ryder. I do have a few questions. As you were going through your presentation, especially, first of all, can you tell us how are you all engaged? Is there an administration between you two of you all? For example, you talked about the cafeteria workers who then call you up. Do they call you directly? Do they speak with a principal? Because my concern is just to making sure that as you all do your job, that administration is involved and is aware of what's going on. I want to make sure that that's happening.
Absolutely, good question. Administration is always notified when we are given a report of a criminal offense. Discipline and criminal law are completely separate in the school system. We don't have anything to do with discipline, but we know that when we investigate an allegation of misconduct, an allegation of a criminal law, we always notify the administration. Sometimes the administration already knows and they tell us about it. Sometimes we get the report from maybe the cafeteria worker directly because they see the officer right there in the cafeteria. Then the officer would turn around and notify the administrator.
You know, I struggled with some of the things that I saw on the news and on Facebook and some of the social media of what really happened, because I just don't know personally. I haven't read a case or anything like that. But, you know, initially, my first thought was, why are we doing this? When it's such a nominal amount of money. Our children are sometimes at play. Even my own child, sometimes does the darndest things. And does that mean that I need to, call the DA on my son? And, I guess I want us to think as a board and as superintendent, how do we really make that line and that we're consistent across the board? Because my second part of that question was the people that you stated in, I think it was slide 6, how many of them were African American, Hispanic? How many of them were of minority descent? I really would like to know that.
Okay. So what I can tell you is, and please remember that, first of all, we care about every student, okay? And it's unfortunate when we have to file charges on any student. But in these cases, in the forgery cases, the officer is not the one standing at the end of the lunch line taking the money from the students, okay? It's a cafeteria worker who is trained to use the starch pen. I believe in my conversations with Ms. Stotler, they receive annual training, okay? And when the pen indicates that the bill may not be authentic, their responsibility is to turn around and report that. And once that's reported to us, it doesn't matter who the student is or what they look like, we investigate that. Many times we don't even know who the student is until we get into the investigation. So I can assure you from our end of it, the skin color, the ethnicity has nothing to do with the investigation. We are investigating a report that comes to us, okay? And then out of that, the facts are what they are.
Okay, so do you not have the answers to that
I'm
question?
sorry. Now, in each one of the 7 cases that referred to the district attorney, they were all minority suspects. Now, I will tell you that the 3 out of the 4 cases from 2013 and 2014 that have already been disposed of in the system, again, 3 out of 4 of those didn't have anything to do with a lunch line. It was people who either handed a fake bill to an administrator and got change for that, and they knew it was fake, or they paid somebody for, I think one was a pair of shoes, and they had fake money in an envelope, and they gave it to the student. And so, in one case was they were printing $20 bills at home and cutting them up into sheets and passing them out at school. I mean, these are legitimate cases of forgery, and again, 3 out of 4 of those didn't have anything to do with the lunch line. Again, the report was that this seems to revolve all around paying for lunch, and that's just simply not the case.
Okay, so we have cases outside of paying for lunch. We've got cases where I think I read where someone exchanged money with an adult of some case. So there's obviously, and I have to admit, guys, I didn't know we had, within our area. I think this is a bigger issue besides Fort Bend ISD. In our area, that we've got some counterfeit and forgery going on. But I think what the community wants to understand from this board is really how and when do we engage the police? Is there an opportunity for us, whether it be in policy or procedure, for us to, stop it from moving forward to Chief Ryder and his team? I mean, because there's some things that we do know that sometimes, based on the lenses of the people that are looking at it, they might actually do something different. You might get into a cafeteria person that knows young Jim and tells young Jim, this is fake, young Jim. Don't bring this back. Are we consistent in how we are dealing with counterfeit and forgery across the board? Because I believe that, that could possibly be an opportunity, because when you look at the numbers, when you look at your percentages, it's important for us that we are consistent, and how do we kind of police that consistency within all of our schools? Because if young Jim, I know young Jim, this is him 20 years ago, right? Yeah, 20 years ago. He's given he picked up a $2 bill and he's given it, you know, but because I know him, I'm going to let him pass, right? But then there's cases where may not know you, I'm looking at you from a different type of lens, I'm definitely going to write you up. It's very clinical, very technical on how we treat our children. So I just want to make sure we're consistent.
So what you're asking, yes, is for Chief to explain our consistency in enforcing or in handling these situations.
Well, I think what you're, if I understand, and just for clarification, I think what you're asking is before it gets to us. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, for clarification, I think what you're asking is the process before it gets to the police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So once it's been handed to you, you have an obligation to write the case, to follow your procedures.
Yes, ma'am. We have an obligation to follow up on that. And again, we use every resource. And when you go back and look at these cases, over 75% of them were exonerated. 75% were never even sent to the district attorney. And there's minority students in there too. So I think that demonstrates that we're doing everything we can to only refer the cases that are absolutely necessary. And the district attorney acts as a second set of eyes for us. So in other words, we're not making an arrest right then and there on a felony, okay? We are sending that case to the district attorney's office for another set of eyes to look at that, another investigator, another entity, another agency that's not connected with the school or that student at all. And they will then have the final determination whether or not charges are filed. So it's kind of a checks and balance system, and it helps us make sure that the only ones that are being sent over there are the ones that absolutely meet the elements.
Okay, and so I think Ms. Hellinger is backing it up a little bit, maybe before it comes to you. Do we have consistency on our campuses between administrators and the lunchroom staff that when these situations arise, a case of forgery, that we have consistent procedures to handle those situations?
From a lunchroom standpoint, I would like to turn that over to Ms. Stotler and let her have an opportunity to answer that.
Thank you.
Our practices and procedures have been consistent over the years. We have always checked the money, $5 and above. You know, if it feels funny or if it has any indication that it may not be a true bill, then we'll mark it with a pin. If that shows that it could be a counterfeit, then we immediately take that to the officers. We don't allow our staff at the end of the serving line to try to make a determination if I know the child or if I don't know the child, because we don't want to get into anything that could be controversial.
And can I just interrupt, because this is where I understand what you're saying, but by allowing that to happen, you're actually automatically creating an inconsistency. And we're saying we want consistency, but if you're allowing one person to make a judgment, one cafeteria worker to make a judgment, there could be even two different lines at the same school, and one knows the person and the other one doesn't know, so you're automatically getting inconsistencies. And so I don't think that's really quite the way to solve it. So thank you. I'm sorry, I just wanted to. That's fine.
And I think you just said it was a $5 limit, and then we had a case of $2. So I'm not quite sure how that happened then.
Well, the $2, we said that we check $5 and above. That's been our policy. With this $2 bill, I wasn't even aware of it until it came to the light recently. But I know that the reason that person did that is because it did look counterfeit. You had the red serial numbers, etc. So, I mean, there was reason there to question the bill, whether it was 5 or 2 or 10.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Tusson, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I wanted you to expand a little bit because I heard when you discussed some of the reporting that was done about the 13-year-old being arrested. Can you talk a little bit more about what a referral to the DA actually means? Because I think from what I've seen on some of the social media and some of the some of the feedback that I've gotten, there's some confusion about the procedures and the difference between an arrest, an investigation, a referral, and then what actually happens when the DA takes it. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. And let me start with, in the case of the $2 bill, the 13-year-old, no referral was made, no charges were filed. That report was closed that afternoon. So just want to be clear on that. That's not how it was reported. When our officers investigate a case, when they look into it, if they determine that probable cause exists, that an offense may have been committed or that an offense was committed, we can do a couple of things. We could either make an arrest right then, depending on the offense and the severity and the age of the suspect. And there's a whole bunch of different laws that governs that. But in a nutshell, we have the ability to either make an arrest or to refer the charges to the district attorney's office. In these type of cases, we refer it to the district attorney's office because it is a big deal. This is a significant case. And so once it gets to the district attorney's office, they have the final say-so on whether or not charges are going to be filed. If it's a juvenile, they can go ahead and file the charges that way. If it's an adult for a felony, then it goes to a grand jury. And so the grand jury then determines whether or not there's probable cause, and they indict or true bill or no bill, and then send that to court accordingly. A criminal referral is when we send a case to the district attorney's office, the officer will let the administration know in writing that the case has been referred and what the student has been referred for. That is to put the administration on notice about what is going on with that case. Now again, that's another way that we make sure that the administration is aware of it. And so I hope that answers.
Do we notify parents when a referral is made?
We would notify parents before the referral is made. Sometimes the referral doesn't come for a week or 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks, depending on how long it takes to investigate the case and determine whether or not charges were filed. Oftentimes, we write a report and it comes to a supervisor, and the supervisor looks at it and says, you need more in this, or you need to find out this, or there are things that need to be done in the case. And so we don't automatically refer a case right when we write the case. We have to make sure that all the elements are there and everything is included in the report. All the evidence, pictures, photographs, statements, all those things have to be included before we even send it to the district attorney's office. And then even at that point, the district attorney may come back, which they often do, and say, we want to see X, Y, and Z, and they give us another list of things that we need to go back and find.
Is it common for you for your department and the officers in your department to get a statement from the student and or the guardian during this investigative process?
It is common. We definitely try to do that because, especially in these forgery cases, the intent is the guiding element there. And so if we can get a statement that says, hey, I found the bill on the ground, or I got it at a convenience store as change for the Coke and the candy bar I bought this weekend, there's no intent there. I found money on the ground too myself, and I would hate to pick that up and pass that at a convenience store and then get charged with forgery. I completely understand that. And so we do ask for statements, and we do try to sit down with the students and with the parents. And sometimes they choose to talk to us and sometimes they don't. And that's their right. And we're fine with that. But we try to explain to them that we want to be able to include their side of the story.
Okay, 2 more questions. Another thing I wanted to clarify, I read in an article recently that was picked up about our 13-year-old $2 bill middle school student, that student's lunch money was taken, which was the $2 bill, and that student was not fed that day. Can you verify that?
I can certainly verify that. I spoke to the officer personally, and I asked him that very question. And before he left that lunch line, he told the cafeteria worker, make sure that student eats. And I've confirmed with Ms. Stotler, every time we have one of these cases, we make sure that student eats. When an officer asks a cafeteria worker to provide a lunch for them, they do it without question. And so I can tell you that according to my officer, and I trust my officer, the officer said that student ate lunch that day. We're not going to let a student go without eating lunch.
So we're not taking their lunch money and not giving them a meal?
No.
Okay. So my last question, or I guess maybe it's a statement. I understand what you're saying, that when these cases are referred to you, that you have an obligation to investigate and follow certain procedures, and that's separate and apart from the educational portion of the school district, from the administration and even from board policy. I understand that we can't step in and get involved in your investigative procedures. So thank you for sharing that. I, share Ms. Helliger's concern that we have consistency across the board, and that's not just in the lunchroom, Ms. Stotler, but I think we need to make sure that all of our campuses are responding consistently to these and really all types of activities, criminal or otherwise, that come up. And maybe that's something that we want to look at in our board policy to make sure that we have clear guidelines on that, and Dr. Dupree to make sure that those things are being consistently carried out at all campuses. I know that we can't get into determining which students to do this for, which students not to do this for, and I don't think that any of us would want to get involved in that, but I do think that we should make sure that our policies are clear and our procedures are clear and that they're consistently being carried out. Thank you very much for presenting for us today, Chief Ryder.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate the clarity of your presentation. So I have a couple things. One of the things that I'd like to bring up is, since you are resource officers, I think given what has happened over the past few weeks, I think it would be good, maybe beginning next school year, to really educate our students, especially at the high school level, on the severity of counterfeiting. As was pointed out, we don't have a say as to whether you investigate something or not, a charge or not, or an incident, I should say, not even a charge. And I don't think we want to get into determining, well, $5 is okay or $10 is not. You can't do that. We just can't. We know we can't do that. And so I think that in education, so that these kids understand that if they choose to engage in activity like that, it's serious. I mean, it's a federal crime. And then I guess the only other thing that I was really thinking of procedurally was, would it be possible, given the fact that counterfeiting at our lunch lines is not really an epidemic as what you've shown here, would it be possible, and I don't know exactly how the procedure is, to just take that money? I'm assuming that each school, at the end of the day or at some point, that money that's taken at the lunch counter goes to the bank, and the bank goes through it and credits or debits our account. I'm not an accountant anymore. I don't remember. And I'm assuming that there is a scan for, some kind of scan for counterfeit money. So is there a way that we see how that works, so we kind of eliminate, the lunch folks having to, sit there and make those determinations? And if it shows up that we're getting reports from a bank that says, hey, we're getting a bunch of counterfeit money at such and such high school, that we have to go back and start doing that. Is that maybe something that, as an idea, that's reasonable, or would it at least give the impression that, okay, we're not sitting there, looking at this kid versus this kid. It's we're getting the reports from the bank. So.
Well, I'll address the first part on the education piece, and I appreciate that, because as the officers sitting over there will tell you, I tell them we are educators first, and that doesn't take anything away from us as a law enforcement entity, but I believe that we educate students every day, the way we talk to them, the way we treat them, the way we walk down the hall. Sometimes we're actually in a classroom and we're talking to them, just like you said. And in fact, our IT officer is sitting over there, and I've told him to create a call type for presentations. And one of the things that we are working on, and it's actually already in our strategic plan, is to do exactly what you just said, is to create presentations where we can go in and we can talk to the students, and we can share experiences, and we can tell them what could get them in trouble, and how to avoid that. I think that's important. I think that's an important piece, and not just at the high school level. I think we need to start at the elementary level.
Right.
I think we need to engage the young students so that we change this culture over the course of their cycle in school, and continue to talk to them at a young age for age-appropriate topics. As far as procedures, again, like I said, better is possible. If there's something that's going to make us better, we're open to that. And Gail, from your perspective?
Something we should take under consideration, because just like he said, better is always better.
And just a couple other comments. And so, yeah, I appreciate your comment. I think it would be great to either during lunch periods when you have kind of a captive audience to you know, whether it's a full presentation or not, to just let them know, you know, hey, counterfeiting's serious. If you if you have a bill there that you think looks funny, turn it into somebody. It's not worth it. And then you made another comment, and you said most of our parents prefer not to get their news from the news media, and obviously there's a reason for that, because people don't trust the news media, and I think this is a perfect example of why they don't trust the news media. It's a shame, but it's not about the truth anymore. So I think I want to agree with what everybody else was saying, is, you know, the consistency, and let's just, you know, keep that in mind when we come up with our policies. And again, thank you very much for your presentation.
Mr. George, did you have something you'd like to say? Or Mr. Rudine? Excuse me.
Yes, Madam President. I wanted to tell Chief Ryder, thank you very much for the facts that you stated in your presentation this evening. I appreciate the clarity, and I also agree with Mr. Rosenthal that it's our duty to educate our children and our youth about potential crimes and build that relationship with our students through education. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Mr. George?
Yes, Madam President. I have a couple of questions, and it's partially already answered. One question is, at what point and at what level we decide to refer a case to DA's office? Means at your level, or supervisors, or the officers make that determination? Who do that?
Good question. The officer writes the report. A supervisor, a sergeant, will review the report first. Once the sergeant is finished with that report, and we think that report might go to the district attorney's office, one of the lieutenants will then review that report. Every case that goes to the district attorney's office is reviewed by 2 supervisors, at least 1 sergeant, at least 1 lieutenant, and then that determination is made then. Oftentimes, we'll call the district attorney while we're in the middle of investigating, and we'll say, this is what we have, you know, can you give us some guidance? And they will help us through that. We're in constant communication with the district attorney's office.
So you mean to say you determine there is a criminal intent?
I'm sorry?
There is a criminal intent.
Yes, sir. It has to meet the elements of the offense before we would even consider sending it over to the district attorney's office.
And also piggybacking on Ms. Addie Halliger's comment, one thing I found is, once it is referred to a police officer from the cafeteria or wherever that might be, is there any involvement with the local administration? Means I'm talking about the principal or assistant principal, because what I'm saying is, getting a phone call from a police officer saying that this is what happened, or getting a phone call from an assistant principal saying, okay, this is what happened, we need to talk to you. I think people perceive that as 2 different ways, you know, like, so is there any involvement for them in this process?
There should be. The administration should be in contact with the parents because there's the school discipline, the school conduct code, which we don't have anything to do with the school discipline. In fact, we were specifically written out of school discipline in one of the most recent legislative sessions. And then there's a criminal referral. There's the criminal side of it. And so that's what we deal with. And so we may call the parent and tell them what's going on from our side of it, and we may tell them you're going to receive a phone call from the principal, so it's not a shock, or from an assistant principal. You know, sometimes the administrator calls the parent first, And they talk to the student first, and then once they realize that there might be a criminal violation, now they call us in. So we work hand in hand with the administration, and we have to make sure that all the bases are covered and the parents are notified.
So you said it should be. Is that the case all the time, or is not?
Well, again, I don't have any control over the administration, so in my opinion, and what I believe is happening is the administrator should contact the parents when their students are being dealt with at
A
school.
couple of incidents we are dealing with these days. In that case, is that happened? Do you know anything about it?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay, and you know what? Like everyone else said, I greatly appreciate the clarity. I appreciate the presentation because I believe these stories need to be told and people need to know what exactly happened. I appreciate what you all do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. George, Mr. Rice?
Thank you, Madam President. Chief, all my questions have been answered, so I would just like to say thank you for your leadership of our school resource officers and moving the department to become accredited, and thank you for your focus on educating our students, our children, every day, and the way you walk down the halls and interact with them and connect with them. And I know that education is our primary objective, and feeding them lunch, Ms. Stotler has done such a great job of. I know that's our primary objective because of the amount of the delinquent lunch fund that Mr. Bassett has pointed out. We make sure everybody gets fed before they return to class. So I'd just like to say thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Chief Ryder. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for a great presentation, as my colleagues have said. Thank you for your hard work every day in helping your officers to build relationships with our 74,000 students so that they can see great role models walking our school halls and doing the right thing and teaching them. And I appreciate the way you talked about your role as an educator, and I appreciate how your officers embrace that.
Well, thank you. And it's those officers over there that do it. They're the ones that are in the hallways every day, not me. So
Right.
they're the
Well,
ones.
we appreciate your leadership, and I'm sure that they do too. So thank you all very much for being here tonight, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Meeting adjourned.